OP-11 set and 6 new starter decks just released in English version of One Piece card game. That's why today we try to predict how the meta will look like in the West. We will do it in a format of the tier list. And let's start with the new leaders released in OP-11. Starting with the boogeyman of the format, Monkey D. Luffy in blue-purple color identity. For those of you who are up to date with meta in Japan, it should be no surprise that I will put him directly in the S tier, because even though we receive new starter decks that are supposed to shake up the meta, I think we need to wait and see which leaders can match the raw power of this Monkey D. Luffy leader. First of all, doesn't matter which deck are you maining. In OP-11 you need to consider going into the big tournament or maybe even locals. If you want to win, if you want to stay competitive, how are you going to beat Monkey D. Luffy blue-purple? Leader is really flexible to build, to adjust to any meta, to any threats that we are shooting at him. So it's not an easy task. On top of that, it's 6000 power leader, and if you are too slow to push him down, he will just start drawing 2 cards per turn from 8 dawn onwards. Disgusting leader, very oppressive, and you are always on a clock playing against him. And on top of that, he can easily ramp up and abuse the cards like Blue Sanji to start spamming big characters on the board. For sure, S tier. For the current start of the meta, if you pick any other leader, start thinking how are you going to match up into him. Next, let's go one by color, so starting with Kobe. I will put Kobe directly in the C tier, not the F, in the C. Leader is interesting, nice characteristic, red-black. You can do some funny combos with your sword and navy type characters, but nothing impressive in my opinion to shake the meta. Next we have Jinbe. Jinbe I will put straight into the F tier together with Shirahoshi. I think those two new leaders not impressive in any way. Jinbe just mono green leader. We already have better green leaders to play in the meta, and then Shirahoshi is just green-yellow leader that cannot attack and has the gimmick of Sea Kings, so nothing impressive as well to write home about, especially if we take a look competitively. If you play for fun, if you just enjoy the characters, then for sure try out all the leaders and find the one that you like best. Moving on, we have Nami, and Nami is interesting pick. There was a lot of brainstorming if this leader will be OP due to the fact that basically makes your leader 7000 power for a turn. I still think that West might break the leader in some way, especially due to color identity, blue-yellow, really flexible to build this leader depending on the strategy. That's why for now I will put Nami in the B tier, and we need to wait and see how it goes. I think the leader gets really disgusting with the starter deck of Ace and Newgate, but we don't get this starter deck yet. And then the last leader of the 6 from OP-11, it's monocolor Katakuri, very interesting purple leader. Beautifully done effect that reminds us of the Katakuri from manga and anime. Really like this deck for the flavor alone, and I will also put him in a B tier. I think we can see some good representation of the Katakuri, very popular character. Back in the day, a lot of players played yellow Katakuri, not only because it was a strong deck, but also because the character is so loved. For now, B tier, because I can see Katakuri being a slightly worse purple leader in monocolor. I have other pick for A tier, but we need to wait and see. Maybe we will need to lower the tier to see for Katakuri. Next, I would like to rate the leaders that received the starter decks. So per color, we will start with the red Shanks. And the red Shanks is really interesting leader, especially for the new players in the game. I think even though the starter deck was not so spicy, I think we will still see some Shanks representation, especially with the new Uta and Shanks printed in the starter deck. For now, I will give benefit of a doubt that they will be good enough to put Shanks into the B tier and see how it does in a meta. I think A would be too high, but as a B tier leader, he's for sure playable, and for sure we will see some of the Shanks players make it to the top cut, in my opinion. The next starter deck is in green, and I think this is actually the worst starter deck out of all of them for the leader that is associated. And that's why I don't have high hopes for Bonnie in this meta, even though I really like green leaders. I think Bonnie I need to put in the C tier, just right here, and we need to wait and see what will happen. It's still strong green leader, probably the best one with the monocolor identity, but I think this set brings too strong of a power creep for Bonnie to catch up with all the other leaders, especially with such a weak starter deck. The next leader that I have is Buggy, and Buggy is amazing with the starter deck. I have really high hopes for this leader. It's another blue leader that gets a card like Jimbe in a starter deck, so they ban Jimbe just to print Crocodile and Miho, which is weird to me. Also they fix going second curve for the Buggy, and in the West we really like the control decks, and once you start chaining your 10 cost Buggy and removing for free one of the opponent's threats from the board, it's a lot of fun. I have high hopes for Buggy. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would like to put him in the A tier. I think until now Bandai never misses with the starter deck for blue color, but we need to wait and see. Nonetheless, high hopes for Buggy to perform. Next we have another Luffy leader, this time with purple and black. He also received really spicy starter deck with a Luffy character that is buffing up the base power of our leader up to 7000 power. Really nice answer to the high power level of other leaders in the meta. Luffy was already in a good spot in my opinion. We saw some representation in the Japanese meta, but now with such a great starter deck, I think we can elevate Luffy up to the A tier as well. This is the second starter deck that I have high hopes for. That's why I want to also include him in the A tier as a contender. Next we have Blackbeard, and Blackbeard is really interesting and polarizing leader. You either destroy everything, especially the decks that rely on the on-play effects, or you just get the matchups that destroy you. And because of this polarization, I'm hesitant to put him in the A tier, even though the support for Blackbeard is great. One new blocker from the OP-11 and additional nice tools, especially Kuzan from the starter deck. However, I will put Blackbeard for now in the B tier. I don't expect much from him, especially in the West. I might be wrong, but I think the whole spotlight will be between S and A leaders that we put there, especially early in the meta. And for Blackbeard, I think we need more predictable meta instead of a jungle that we will have at the start to perform well. But we need to wait and see. For sure, one of the strongest black decks. And next we have last starter deck released out of 6, and this is Yamato. And with Yamato I have a problem, because on the one hand it's also one of the best starter decks that we saw. A lot of great support, identity of the deck is getting tighter. We finally understand in which direction Bandai would like to put Yamato green-yellow deck. However, we need to consider that Yamato historically has two builds at least, one more aggro oriented and one more fortress oriented. So I think depending of the meta we can adjust, and just based on that I would like to put Yamato in the B tier, just give some benefit of a doubt due to sheer power of a support that Yamato receives in the starter deck, and also because we are flexible with the build and it's not always clear for our opponent what build will we play that can give us some advantage. And even though those are the main leaders of the starter decks released, I would like to highlight one more leader, that is Trafalgar Law in green-yellow identity, because I think from the starter decks the Law is the true winner. Sure, from the base leaders, Buggy, just amazing, but if we take a look at the sheer power of the OP-11 cards, at the promos that we are getting for the regionals, and also the starter deck from Bonnie, the green cards, we can make really powerful Trafalgar Law, and we already know that in Japan they played Trafalgar Law as a so-called counter for the meta, so I think we can safely put Trafalgar Law into the A tier to contest the meta with sheer power and passion that players have for this leader. I already saw some interesting list going around the Twitter, so the kitchen is open. I think we can see some dominance of green-yellow. Next, I would like to speak about other Luffy leaders, just to have it out of the way. We know in Japan the meta was named Luffy meta, and we can see why. First of the Luffys we already placed in the S tier, the Luffy that is bending the meta around himself. The next one I would like to speak about is the best deck in format, or the previous format, however it sounds. Green-purple Luffy, really interesting leader, really strong, won basically everything that was possible in the previous format. So going into OP-11 with starter decks, a lot of players that already invested time and money into this deck will continue to play him and look for the results with a deck. The matchup into blue-purple Luffy is not so bad, so I'm really hesitant here. I think even though Luffy is kind of in his own tier, if we want to put a deck that is able to match him with the power and the matchup spread in the meta, I would put our green-purple Luffy also at the top together with another Luffy. So two Luffys in S tier. I think either of those picks gives you the biggest chance to perform well in any given tournament, especially in the big tournaments where consistency is important. Both of those decks have flexible builds, a lot of tech choices depending on the predicted meta, so I'm sure we will see a lot of them in top cuts and winning the tournament, either blue-purple or green-purple Luffy. Next Luffy we need to mention here, and I will put him directly with another Luffy down here in the A tier. So on the top we have two Luffys, and then in the A tier we have also two Luffys, will be the purple Luffy. Purple Luffy build that we saw in Japan is already adjusted to fight with blue-purple Luffy, especially with addition of a new card that is blocker Katakuri. Amazing buff for the purple leaders, and like I said, I think perfect curve purple Luffy is stronger than Katakuri for sure. That's why Katakuri B tier and purple Luffy in the A tier, because with the new build we are able to challenge the blue-purple Luffy players for a good game, and on the other hand we still can do the disgusting things that PCP can do. And last Luffy that we need to highlight here is another 6000 power Luffy that is red-purple. Obviously when we get the buffs to the purple side of the decks, also the red-purple benefits, also with the starter decks for the purple-black one. So there is a big card pool to test for this leader, and just because I think this will be the testing phase for the leader, how good he can use those cards, I will put him for now in the B tier. I saw players already cooking with him, and I think we will see at least one in the top cut, but I think the usage of the leader is not so high. So yes, the specialist or one-trick pony players of the deck will perform well, but I don't think that we will see the dominance of this leader like we expect from the other Luffys. So only because of that I will put him in a B tier, but keep an eye out for this leader sneaking into the top cut or maybe even winning a tournament. We need to wait and see. Next I would like to shortly speak about Bello Betty, so the aggro spectrum of the meta. In Japan, Bello Betty was the clear answer for the blue-purple Luffy. However, I'm not sure how good Bello Betty will be in our format with so many different decks being in the meta. As a benefit of a doubt, I need to put Betty in the A tier because it's still a great pick for any given tournament, especially expecting blue-purple or green-purple Luffys at the top. But if it happens that we will see a lot of buggy enthusiasts with the shoe buggy, then we are kind of stuck. We just see the leader flip and need to handshake our opponent immediately and just go eat a good dinner. But we need to wait and see how the representation really will be. We are still in the testing phase. I think it's only fair to put Betty in the A tier just out of respect how good the matchup into blue-purple Luffy is. Next, another leader that also make appearance in the Japan meta to kind of counter blue-purple Luffy is Lucci. Lucci never dies. All the nerfs, bans and so on, Lucci always finds the way, but the problem is that with so many different decks right now in the A tier, not even S tier, because in S tier, okay, we can argue that green-purple Luffy may be winnable, but blue-purple Luffy, the problem is that the games are really long, what I heard from the experience in Japan, so it's really risky to bring Lucci in the long tournament because you will exhaust yourself. If you play many blue-purple Luffys, you will go to time, okay, you will green them and maybe eventually win, but the time investment might be not worth it. Because of that, I will put Lucci together with another black deck in the B tier, not A, in the B, because I'm not sure how good Lucci will be, especially with a buggy present that can really outvalue the board really quick and go horizontally with high cost characters. Actually, buggy is the buggy man for Lucci right now. So really interesting to see if there is some kind of adjustment from the best Lucci players in OP-11, or are they going to switch off the leader? For now, B tier, because the power level of the leader stays high despite all the bans, but we need to wait and see how Lucci can adapt to the meta. Next, I would like to highlight some other leaders that we might see in the meta. For sure, Smoker, with additional support from the red side of the OP-11, I think Smoker can put up some fight in the meta. I'm not sure how good he will be, so I will just put him here together with the other strong B tier decks, and we need to wait and see how Smoker performs. The deck on paper is really strong, and in the fresh meta we can see some good games from Smoker players for sure. And another deck in the same manner I think will be Marco. Marco is also this kind of the leader that can thrive in the new meta where things are not settled. Also, I saw some good opinions about Marco in the overall OP-11, even on the Japanese meta, and now with the starter decks in the mix, Marco can really shine also against other leaders, so I will put him also in B tier. And just because we receive new yellow support in form of Zeus, I think we should highlight also the existent yellow leaders. NL I would put between B and C, but I think NL is more of a so-called noob trap. So if your opponent is new, has no experience playing against NL, doesn't know how to hold the board, how to threaten lethal, how to change target to the characters, then maybe you can catch them off guard. But if we are speaking about players on the same level of skill, then I think NL starts to fall off and is this kind of the gatekeeper deck. Until you get better into the game, you will be losing into the NL, or if you play some form of aggro and just get stuck your one game against NL fan, then you just have a bad day. But I don't expect high meta shifts for NL, especially with the Raigo ban, or in English version Kingdom Come. And another leader that is also yellow and has some fans is Yellow Kid. And Yellow Kid, if I remember correctly, will receive now the promo low finally from the regionals. So we might see some representation of Kid, but I will put him in the same tier as NL. Doesn't matter to me if you play NL or Kid. I think those decks don't match the power level of the other decks just yet. We need to wait and see. Maybe I'm just biased because I'm not a fan of mono yellow right now, but we need to wait and see. Prove me wrong. Let's see how many NL and Kid players will make it to the top cut, and then we can shift the tier list a bit. And lastly, we have my pick for a start of the meta, as always, Zoro. I will put Zoro in the A tier. And why is that? Normally, if we would be discussing the Japan meta, I would put Zoro probably in the B tier. But Zoro is interesting deck, the same as Bello Betty. At the start of the meta, normally aggro decks have an advantage because a lot of players are still experimenting with the lists, and aggro decks, the plan is quite simple. You just need to think which decks are you going to face if you need some adjustments. And even though we can say that, okay, but we will have buggy, shoe buggy is really scary and so on, we have some tricks in Zoro that we can do to make the matchup playable. So it's not auto lose, like for example buggy into Bello Betty, where Betty is just staring at the shoe buggy and is just waiting for the end of the game. So for Zoro, I think the spread will be 50-50 into the Luffys, depending on the builds. Depending on your Zoro build as well, there are some tricks that you can do. Obviously into green purple Luffy, it depends kinda if you play Morgan. Into blue purple Luffy, it depends how you build your rushers around, if you include blocker chopper and so on, but these details we can go into the Zoro guide that I plan to make. So do not upset anything here, let's just say 50-50 depending on the builds, with the slight advantage for Zoro if it is built correctly. Then into buggy, like I said, we have some tricks. I didn't put much testing into buggy yet, so let's just say buggy is advantageous just because the characters are bigger than ours and he can also spam the board, so let's say this is the losing matchup. Purple black Luffy, I think it's possible to aggro them down like before. Now the only problem will be the drinking Luffy that makes the base power bigger. So maybe the Mulligan will be needed, we need to wait and see. Trafalgar Law, I think the matchup is the advantage for the Zoro, but let's see how the new Kid and Killer change it, because maybe there will be some adjustments to the build that will make it harder for Zoro. Purple Luffy historically advantageous to Zoro ever so slightly, so I don't see much changes to Luffy that they can do to turn it around. Obviously, if they hide behind the 9-cost mom, if you let them stabilize, then you will have a problem, but I don't think the 8-cost Katakuri makes any problem to Zoro, because we have a lot of small attacks to force the free block and then just push the life. And Betty, and Betty players already know from the EB set that Zoro has advantage here. Unfortunately to Betty, Zoro in the head-to-head is just a better deck. So even though players can pick up Betty to counter Luffy, they will be really unhappy if they meet Zoro. For the other decks, nothing much to say. Obviously any black decks, Teach or Lucci, always hard to play against, but all the other matchups I think are manageable. Obviously if you meet any yellow players, then you might have a bad day, but it's not so one-sided like before. We still have some tricks to play against NL and Kid, and maybe if we have a little bit of luck we can win those matchups. For all the other leaders that are not here in the list, I think it's just not worth to spend time evaluating them. If they C, D, E or F, doesn't change anything from the competitive perspective because the pure power level of the other decks is just higher. We need to keep an eye, maybe some rogue decks appear based on the amount of cards that we received between OP-11 and starter decks, but for now I think those are the most relevant decks that we should pay attention to. So here you have it, my tier list for OP-11 together with the starter decks in the English format, but now it's your turn. Let me know in the comments below, do you agree with my evaluation? Maybe I missed some leader that is actually rogue pick and will just shake the meta? Leave your comment below and we can discuss. But that's it for today. Thank you for watching, see you in the next video, bye bye.